Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for being here today. This is a very short presentation. I'll try my best to share some of the readings, some of the things that I learned through being a parent. And I'm sure I'm going to learn so much also as well from you. So I'm going to make this very interactive as much as I can. I don't want to talk for the whole time, so there will be some parts where you will have to contribute as well. So shall we start? Okay, here we go. So I'd like to start first of all by making this supplication. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless this gathering, guide us to raise our kids and the next generation to be the best of themselves. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make our children the coolants of our eyes. Ameen. Maybe, we are not, some of us maybe are not parents yet. So also I'd like to make this dua by asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant those who are not parents yet with pious, healthy children at the best time. So let's say Ameen. And this presentation actually is not only meant for parents, but those who are planning to be parents in the future, or hopefully they will be parents in the future. And so your presence today matters because you can function as a support system for uplifting someone else, or maybe being ready for the future, and also being a support for the whole ummah. I have a disclaimer here to say, to share before I start the presentation. I'm not an expert in parenting or psychology, okay? So you need to understand that. So if I make a mistake, it is from me and shaitan. And if it is right, it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This session is meant to be an open invitation for all of us to learn and grow together as parents or people who are supporting, parents. And what I did, I checked a lot of Islamic, let's say, references, as well as some Western references in order to come up with some kind of presentation that will strike a balance between religion and science. So please feel free to chip in. Your thoughts, your ideas, your questions are more than welcome. Okay, I'd like to start always, when I give a presentation with some housekeeping items. So please, if you have a phone which is not a silent yet, please do so. This is not going to be a one-ticket interaction. Everybody has to get into this discussion. And then there will be some moments, where I will ask you to pause and reflect and share your experiences. And then if you need to step out, please feel free to do so. And please bring your heart and your honesty to this presentation. Okay, before we start this presentation, I'd like to say, regardless what approach, regardless what theory you might have knowledge about, guidance always comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to just function as parents. So our role is to be caretakers, not controllers, and we're just responsible for the efforts. Sometimes the outcomes might not lean to what we want to see. So all what we need to do is to work hard, take all the necessary steps, and then leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we know, even the prophets couldn't guide their own people and their own family members. Okay, so this emphasizes the idea that guidance comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, in Surah Al-Qasas, chapter 28, verse 56, indeed, O Muhammad, you don't guide whom you like, but Allah guides whom He wills. So we need to understand that we just have to do our work, and hopefully Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer the call for us to have pious kids. Now, a very good example that everybody, I guess, knows about, which is the story of the Prophet Noah, or Nuh alayhi salam, and his son. Imagine you work on da'wah for almost 1 year, 1,000 years, and then your own kids and your own wife, okay, do not respond to the call. How would you feel? So this is a very clear example that we just have to do our job and then leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we just have to plant the seed and water them with rahmah, and we just have to trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because He is the best planner. Now, I know that people are buying into this idea that when we are educated and we know the science and we know the theories about psychology and about parenting, we should end up with having good children. But I think beyond science, we need to believe in the power of dua, or supplication, and parenting. Because sometimes you can do everything possible to have your kids raised in a certain fashion, but without the dua or the supplication, sometimes you might get disappointed. So I just wanted to remind everybody that yes, we know that science laying out a lot of foundations, a lot of theories, a lot of let's say guidelines, for us to follow in order to be good parents and also hopefully to have, good kids. But without also having that belief system in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He is the one who could guide people, and having continuously making dua or supplication, then we might, feel disappointed sometimes. So I know that science and parenting theories are very helpful too. I'm not saying that we should not read and educate ourselves about these theories, but also we need to have this belief system that we need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help. Because hearts are guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not only by following, certain methods. This is why the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to pray or used to make dua or supplication for his ummah and for his kids, because we always have to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, we cannot do it by ourselves. Okay, this is something that we have to keep in mind all the time when we bring up our kids. So as we know that a believer's weapon is dua, and it has to be done consistently and in a daily basis if possible, not only during crisis times. And we need to understand, even when all the strategies that we have learned, we've been exposed to, might fail, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never fail us. So all what we need to do, in addition to this education that we have to do, we need to keep connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through supplication. Remember, dua should not be the last resort, but it has to be the first and the most powerful tool in Islamic parenting. So the formula has to be reversed. We need to start with dua, and then we get this education and we try all possible way to get these kids, to the right path. Now, Islamically speaking, we all know that parenting is a form of worship. So, which means the more effort, the more knowledge, the more education you put into this noble cause, the more reward you will get. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ indicated in his famous hadith, each of you is a shepherd, okay, which emphasizes the idea of that you need to take care of your surroundings, your family, your community, and also the ummah in general. So this is a very important concept. I think somehow it happens is that we bought into this idea that we need to only refer to the West or to knowledge in general in order to get our answer, our question answers, or our concerns, answers. So we need to also refer to our religious, let's say, script, and also the Quran, and also some of the prophetic traditions by the Prophet Muhammad, and even some of the stories, happening during the Prophet Muhammad's time, or even with the people they were combining the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of course, we need to understand that science does not conflict with Islam. There are a lot of overlapping areas between science and Islam, okay? And sometimes you'll be surprised to know that there are a lot of Muslim scholars who invested a lot of time in talking about psychology and the role of psychology in bringing up kids. And I think, Sheikh Hafid has a lot to say about this, because he's teaching a course about the role of Muslim scholars, okay, in science, because sometimes the history is somehow misrepresented to be dominated by maybe Western scholars more than other scholars. So we need to understand that Muslims have contributed and are still contributing to science, okay? Sort of taking a lot of the Islamic essence into developing these, let's say, psychological theories and parenting rules. Now, why we think this topic is important? Everybody knows that we are living in a very overwhelming time. Everybody's busy. Everybody is having all this impact of technology. So there's so much to juggle with these days. So we need to have sort of guidelines, or let's say ways of handling the situation now, because there's so much that you have to deal with. Another thing is, because of all these distractors that we are having around us, technology, social media, there's a kind of disconnect between emotional and spiritual needs. And sometimes we as parents might not pay attention to these ones. And I'll be talking about this, in a minute in details. But we need to be very careful about this, because sometimes when there's this kind of disconnect between these two factors, we might struggle later on with the kids, because spirituality plays a very important role in controlling these emotions. This emotion could be sometimes positive, sometimes can be negative, okay? Because kids are exposed to so much. And whether we like it or not, sometimes we don't have control over that. We are supposed to do some kind of control. I don't like to use the word control, but let's say regulation for how kids can use social media and so on. But still, we need to find a balance between not completely disallowing them, and also making them ready to handle all that pressure, coming from this social media impact. And we need to understand that fitrah, everybody is born with pure fitrah, okay? This inclination towards doing something good is born, everybody is born with, okay? But then the surroundings, people around us, people who tend to interact with us might sort of spoil, or sometimes let's say pollute that this pure fitrah that we've got. So we need also to be very careful about making sure that this fitrah stays at the same level of purity. And I know it is not an easy task, but hopefully through this session and the coming sessions, we'll be able to find ways to nurture this fitrah. Now, the Prophet Muhammad has emphasized this, that every child is born upon the fitrah, which means with natural goodness, but then the parents, the people around them, they tend to change that pure fitrah within the kids. So our job is just to make sure that we are nurturing this fitrah. Now, in psychology, there's something called secure attachment, which is basically safety plus what? Trust. Now, we need to understand in psychology, they're saying that trust is not automatic. It grows with love, consistency, and without these two, sometimes what's going to happen is that this trust will not be built, in other words. So as I said, trust grows through love and consistency. Basically, in a very simple terminologies, children need emotional availability, okay? Children will trust you only if they feel safe, they feel loved, okay? And you need to be open to listen to them, and that way you will be able to develop this trust. And not only that, they will be more like open to the idea of listening to you, and also building this trust will help you to make sure that you educate your kids about whatever you want to educate. So you need to have this love and consistency in order to develop this trust. And back to the idea that scholars from the Muslim world has also contributed to this idea. For example, Al-Ghazali talked about this in so many chapters, okay, in his books. And Imam Ghazali spoke about this almost like 1,000 years ago, when he talked about the idea of being tender, being around, available for your kids, having this emotional connections with your kids from the beginning is very, very important. So I think it is very important to understand that whenever we are trying to be available for our kids emotionally, whenever they need us, that will contribute definitely to building a very strong connection and a trust between the parents and the kids. Now, I want you to look at this situation. And, oops. Okay. Do you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a situation here. A child keeps what? Interrupting. And Do you see the whole thing, or do you see only what the first part?
We see
Because I don't know what.
4 bullets.
Okay, so I think I didn't work on the animation for this part. But anyway, this actually a situation where a child is keeping interrupting a father or mother, and the child doesn't stop. The father yelling or the mother's yelling. Okay, so do you think this is a misbehavior or this is calling for a connection? Anybody want to shout an answer?
Calling for connection.
Yes, definitely calling for a connection. Okay. What would you do as a parent? Anybody? In this situation, you have a child, you're talking to somebody, and the child keeps interrupting you.
Pause and ask him to be patient and wait until you finish. And,
Okay. Go ahead.
and then after you finish, you have to sit down and discuss it with him how to behave. But it is not a good behavior. Anyone while not only parents, anyone. Only maybe if there is someone who
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else?
I actually didn't hear that answer. Could you summarize what he said?
He's saying that first of all, you need to listen to the kid, and then maybe you could have another discussion later on with the kid, if I heard him correctly. Okay.
Yeah, but also you have to caution him by that time that it's not good to interrupt when there is a discussion. Anyone, not only that. Can wait until the discussion is over.
Okay. There's a problem with your voice, okay? But anyway, according to psychology, there are 3 ways that you can use in order to connect or reconnect, because this is actually the kid in this situation trying to establish what? A reconnection, okay, with you. So the first strategy is to have an eye contact with the kid, okay? And sometimes maybe you need to go to their level, okay? Maybe also another thing that you need to do is to have a gentle touch on the kids. And then also you need to label their emotions. For example, in this case, what kind of emotions do you think the kids is trying to express?
He is trying to show that what he is having is very important than whatever you are doing.
Okay, for some reason I cannot hear you. I don't know if it's only me or everybody else.
I think he's using headsets and it's not very audible.
Okay.
No, I'm
Okay.
not on headset. Not on headset.
Okay. So anyway, these are the 3 ways to reconnect with the kids when they are interrupting. First of all, you need to have this eye level contact. Then you have to have this gentle touch. Now, for labeling emotions, maybe the kid has been waiting for you for a very long time while you're talking to another person. So maybe what you need to do is you need to label that, you know what? that emotion by saying maybe, are you frustrated? Are you feeling sad? Okay. And so that, you know, they will feel that, you know, you'll come back to them. Okay. And so, and then later on, you could have a session with them because now they will understand that they are important, they are heard. Okay. And we need to understand that sometimes some kids don't only like to listen to the rules. So at least during that conversation with another person, what we need to do is we need to assure that they are very important, but maybe they need to wait a little bit. Okay. And as soon as they feel that they are important, they might cool down. But if you ignore them and yell at them and you start, you know, like, for example, punishing them in front of everybody else, they might continue doing what they're doing. So you need to cool them down. You need to acknowledge, you know, that they are trying to reconnect, okay? And having this, you know, touch or getting closer to them might cool them down a little bit. And especially when you go to their level in terms of eye contact, they started to cool down. Now, I have some kind of situation and I want you to tell me whether this is a misbehavior or calling for a connection, okay? What do you think? Toy throwing. Is
That
it a
is
misbehavior or a calling for a
misbehavior.
connection? Okay, why?
Maybe they or she needs something to do something, but she or he need attention from you, and then you didn't listen to him.
So basically, this is calling for what? Reconnection or connection.
Reconnection.
Yes, it's not a misbehavior, okay? Why? Because maybe they want you to play with them. Maybe they wanted, you know, you to watch them, okay? Paying attention to them, okay? While they are playing with that toy. What about lying?
Lying is something like
Is it a misbehavior or calling for connection?
Lying is misbehavior.
this connection, I think.
Okay, any other answers and why?
Misbehavior, because if you let it continue, it will be a normal behavior. So you have to control it.
Okay, so it's actually a misbehavior. Why? Because
it will go in him or in her.
exactly. So we need to do something about it, okay? Okay. For example, door slamming, what do you think? Is it a misbehavior or calling for reconnection?
I think it's a misbehavior.
Both.
So it depends, okay? But most likely it is what calling also for what? A connection, okay? You know why? Because sometimes maybe, you know, they were trying to talk to you, maybe you're watching TV or doing something, and they just wanted to, you know, attract your attention. Dad or mom, please pay attention to me, okay? But sometimes it can be a misbehavior, okay? For if you notice that the kids, okay, trying to do this only because they are trying to harm maybe another kid, you know, who is behind the door, then it becomes what? A misbehavior, okay?
Or
How
when he
about
doesn't get his own way.
exactly? Yeah. So for example, whining, what do you think? Is it a misbehavior or asking for reconnection? It is calling for connection or reconnection. What about, hitting another brother or sister? What do you think?
Misbehavior.
Misbehavior. Very good.
Misbehavior.
Very good. What about ignoring instruction? What do you think? Is it a misbehavior or calling for connection?
Calling for connection.
Okay, why?
Maybe the misbehavior, there is a reason. It depends on the reason of why he or she became a misbehaved, Yani.
Okay, very good. So ignoring, you are absolutely right. This is calling for what? Connection. Why? Because sometimes what happens, we tend sometimes, to give instructions without explaining why we're giving these instructions. Okay? Do this, don't do this, whatever, and without justifying why you want them to do this or that. Okay? So this is also another example for what? Calling for connection. Sometimes, there will be a lot of kids who are screaming, yelling. This is also another example of what? Calling for connection. But sometimes doing this to other kids, okay, could be a misbehavior. Because, sometimes, kids can be, let's say, aggressive with other kids through physical touch or through what? Verbal, what we call it, verbal abuse. Okay, so we need to be very careful which situation we are talking about. So, but if they're just, like shouting and yelling and, in the house, okay, this could be only what? Calling for connection. But if they are yelling or shouting at somebody, okay, this could turn to be what? A misbehavior. Anybody has a question?
I think frustration also can let the child start screaming or yelling.
Very true. Very true. Which is actually calling for reconnection as well. Because maybe they feel frustrated, maybe they are not paid attention to, or maybe somebody is ignoring their needs. Okay. So this is why, they yell or they scream. Now, how about stealing a snack without asking? This is what?
Misbehavior.
Exactly.
But
And
just want to ask something about yelling to a child while he's trying to interrupt. If this habit of yelling to a child will also grow into a child, children, because whatever you do, children will follow what you are doing. So we also have to be patient instead of yelling like you said, to show I signal or body language rather than yelling.
very true. Yeah. So I think, the kids tend to copy us. So if we keep shouting at home, maybe at our spouses or at, maybe other kids in the house, okay, they copy that. There's another yelling, which is or screaming out of frustration, as one of the sisters mentioned earlier. But we need to be very careful about, yelling at, especially at them in public, maybe in front of their brothers or siblings, friends. It is very important that, we try to use other ways and understand why they're acting in that fashion. Okay, how about making a mess after being told not to?
Misbehavior.
Why?
Because he or she was instructed not to mess the or the things or whatever is this, but they do yan. So, or it can be also calling for connection
Mhm.
that is especially for the kids.
Mhm. Why? Can you elaborate more?
Because some kids, yani, you're doing something that they ask your attention, like they want to play with you, but you are continue what you are doing that they ask your attention to.
Okay. I
And
totally agree with
like they get misbehave because you do what you do and you don't give attention what they ask, yani.
very good. So as you said, making a mess after being told not to do, it depends if they are told, okay, why they're doing what they're doing, okay, and the purpose and so on, and they continue doing it, then it becomes what? A misbehavior.
Yes,
But if they are told only, do this, don't do that, okay? You go and do your bed, for example, make your bed, okay? And because, the kids, will come up with these, very, very sometimes frustrating questions. Why? Okay. And, some of the parents will come and say, because I told so, okay? Or because I said so, okay? This doesn't, click with the kids. It doesn't register with their understanding. So sometimes we need to explain to them why they are doing what they're doing, okay? In a very simple fashion. If they get it, they will not ask for more questions. If they don't get it, they will ask for more, let's say, clarification and more elaboration from your side. And just you need to be patient with kids. I know sometimes they might ask you the same questions over and over. Sometimes in order to confirm with you what you told them last time. So if you keep changing your answers to them, what's going to happen? Okay? They will what? Go back to yesterday's answer, not today's answer. Or maybe, like a week ago answer over what you're saying now. So we need to be consistent, okay, when it comes to giving answers, okay? So that the kids, because the kids will always remember these things, okay? And they'll tell you, but dad, you said this last time. Why are you changing your mind now? Okay? So we need to think about a way to be consistent with our answers when we talk to our kids. We should not really overestimate, their ability to remember and to understand things. Okay. So what we have discussed so far, I want you to pause and I want you to tell me what you think. Does it resonate with you? And is there anything you would like to challenge or explore further or elaborate on? It is your chance now before we move to the next point.
I think most of what you've said depends also with the age of the child.
Mm-hmm.
As they grow older, they already know the rules and regulations.
Mm-hmm.
And so something that was asking for connection as a 2-year or 3-year-old will be a misbehavior at 9 years old.
Mm. Is it the case
And
all the time?
sorry?
Is it the case every time
No,
or always?
most of the time, not
Mhm.
always.
Okay.
Because it also depends on the child. It also depends whether there is there are other children who
Mhm.
tend to work in tandem to
Mm.
frustrate the parents.
Mm.
Okay, so there are lots of missing, not missing, but different parts that you need to look at. It's not, you know, this is the pillar and it's going to stay there always.
Very true. And this is what I said at the beginning, guidance, especially because, we talk about it, from a Muslim perspective, guidance always comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. All what we need to do is to educate ourselves about the best of practices, the best theories, the best, teachings. Okay. And we try to be consistent in applying these rules and principles in our lives and in their lives. And then we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on a daily basis to give them hidayah and give us also hidayah. Because sometimes, we cannot control it. We are only responsible for our efforts. Okay? We're not responsible for the outcomes. Now, when it comes to the idea, I'm a strong believer in that when you start well, most likely things will end well. So if we start from the beginning, okay, with our kids, using all these right approaches, hopefully we are praying that things will work out with them. But sometimes we don't have control over other circumstances, because as I mentioned at the beginning, there is so much around our kids nowadays. You cannot compare our days when we were kids with what is happening now. There is so much technology access. There is so much access to social media. Okay. If you manage to have it, let's say, controlled at your household, they go to school. They go to other people's houses. And sometimes we might not be able to watch them all the time. But all what we need to do is to take all the necessary steps, make dua, and hopefully they will become, good kids. There are other factors I think you alluded to, which are things which are related to maybe the kids might have some kind of abnormalities, okay, in terms of behaving and having issues, that maybe we need to consult sometimes an expert to help us in handling these kind of situations. Parenting is not a joke. It's a lot of work. I know that everybody, feels happy at the beginning when having kids. Okay, then, oh, I'm having, this number of kids. And especially, when they are born for the first time, we feel very happy. But it's a lot of work, okay? And this is why I believe, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, decided to put, this value for parents after his worship. We find a lot of verses in the Holy Quran that parents come immediately in terms of value after worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or having fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to show that this is not an easy task, okay? And we need all the time to seek help, okay? And I think, in this interaction, we get to learn from each other, okay? Don't shy away from asking questions. I always talk to my wife and said, I read about this. What do you think? Okay, we talk about it. And then we start talking about how we can go about this. But still, we don't know. These kids, could change overnight and then become, aggressive, violent, whatever. But all what we need to do is do our part, make sure that we try to do things based on the Islamic teachings, what science is telling us to do, And then hopefully, with a lot of dua, these kids maybe they will be good. We're praying. Any other thoughts before we move?
I think children need a lot of time with their parents.
Mhm.
And most of us tend to be busy with other things,
Mhm.
whether professional or social or whatever. And unfortunately, we all get kids while we are still young, not very much experience,
Mhm.
and we tend to go back to what our parents did with us.
Mhm.
Sometimes good, sometimes not. So if we were yelled at, we would yell at our children.
Very true.
So, but most times the later children get the more nuanced parents. The first ones really suffer because they're experimental,
Very
and then
true.
we learn along the way.
Yeah, and you know, back to the idea that this is a lifelong journey, okay, in terms of learning, and God will not ask us to do more than what we could do, okay, as long as we're trying our best, okay, and we are educating ourselves about the best of practices. I think we should be fine, okay. As long as we have very good intention from the beginning that we want to bring them to be pious, good kids, then we just have to leave, you know, the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. I don't think we need to have this guilt or blaming ourselves as long as we are doing, you know, our best. Okay, I think let's move to the next. Thank you so much for your contribution. I wanted to emphasize the idea of mercy that is one of the elements that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, or the Prophet Muhammad has been or has used in his approach taking care of kids. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was referring to the Prophet Muhammad as a mercy to the world. Why? Because he lived mercy in his actions. He was gentle, he was wise, he was compassionate, he was trying to do the best he could do using mercy and kindness in his actions. And this is, you know, maybe one thing that we need to consider when we do parenting with kids. So there's this story that happened to a boy in the masjid, and everybody was praying, okay, in jama'ah, and the boy spoke during the prayer. How would you react to this? A boy speaking in the masjid during a prayer.
Of course, you will wait until the prayer is done and then take him aside and explain to him the importance of being in the mosque and why people pray and why it is need to be sacred and respected. And then you give him 2 chances, and the third one you give him
Okay.
good, like not taking him to the mosque, or take him to the mosque and take away something he likes or whatever it is. Yeah.
Very good. Okay. The normal reaction that we tend to see, especially with a lot of people, that they will glare, they will be very furious. Okay. But the Prophet, took this kid and spoke to him gently. And he started talking to him about, that this is the time when we talk to God. This is the time, where we interact with God. So we need to make sure that we are in a very good kind of quiet atmosphere. And the kid was so much touched by this. And you know what he said? He said, I never saw a better teacher than the Prophet Muhammad. Okay. Which shows that, maybe, at home, nobody was teaching him. So we need to understand that talking to people in a gentle tone is a very, very good tool, will solve a lot of our problems. But as one of the sisters said earlier, we are living a very busy life, and sometimes we get stressed by so many factors around us, and then maybe sometimes the kids have to pay the price, okay, because of this stressful lifestyle that we are living. Now, in terms of psychology, it has been proven that being gentle is always effective, okay? And, like whenever you try to be gentle, okay, you reduce the consequences of being harsh, okay, with anybody, including kids. At least if there isn't any kind of immediate impact, there will not be any kind of consequences that could happen because of you being harsh with the kid, okay, at that time. So they were saying, in psychology, they were saying that when somebody is trying to be gentle, this will help in the growth of that child. So I know that, we are used to sometimes using a lot of punishment, okay? But I think, we need, first of all, to use this approach in order to make sure that we are, first of all, exhausting all the effectiveness of being gentle. And then if it doesn't work, maybe we can go to the parents and the grandparents, style, okay, if it doesn't work. Although I don't recommend this, but I've seen it, with a lot of kids nowadays having no confidence, sometimes, acting in a very certain fashion because they were beaten like crazy when they were kids. So we need to be very careful about the idea of being gentle. I'll skip this slide because of the time. And also in psychology, they were saying that small moments lead to big trust. So if we, for example, do rituals or we keep promises and listening deeply, these will definitely shape the heart of your child. So in order to build this kind of a trust, we need to start with these small things that we tend to ignore because we said, it is a tiny thing, they will forget about it, okay? So it is not about, giving lectures, but making sure that we are careful about these small things that we tend to do with kids, which might break this trust between us and the kids. And we need to be consistent all the time with our action. I wanted to give you this story also as well. There's this boy used to be called Abu Umair, and this kid lost his bird. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ saw him crying, and he was not, like happy with his loss. So he comforted him. and he talked to him, you know, this is okay. It's okay to be sad, but you know, everybody died, okay, including birds. And so sometimes talking and comforting kids will play a role in having a very greater impact on them. Okay. Now, I have this situation for you to reflect on. I think, you know, this has happened with a lot of parents. When a parent promised the kid to do something, and then the kid asks, you know, the parents, Daddy or Mommy, you promised to do this and this. What would you do in this situation? What would you do? No answers?
In my opinion, a promise is a promise, whether it's for a child or an adult. That's how
Okay.
you show loyalty, and you teach the child that if he promised, he has to fulfill his promise. If you break it, then you teach him that there is no meaning of promising. It has no meaning.
Yeah. So now, what would you do in this situation? You know, you promised your kids something and then you forgot about it, and the kids kept saying, "You promised, Dad. You promised, Mom." Okay, what would you do?
You have to.
give it.
Okay, go ahead.
Tell him that you forgot, that you will give it to him. And eventually you have to put it a priority and give it to them, whatever it is.
Very good. Okay. The common practice is that, you know, don't say, you know, like, for example, the parents will say, stop nagging, because, you know, the kids will tell you, Dad, you promise, you promise, you promise. Okay. So this is the common way to practice. But what you could do, you can say, what? I'm sorry. You're right. I didn't manage my time well. Okay. Let's schedule this. Let's do this again. Okay. And by doing this, what's going to happen? You're trying to what? First of all, to validate their feelings that they are frustrated. You're also modeling accountability for not fulfilling that promise. And you are you're what? Trying to rectify this breaking of the promise, you know, by saying what? Let's go and schedule it, okay? And this will keep the connection between you and your kids very strong. So I have a question for you. What builds most trust? Which one do you think? A or B or C or D?
D.
Yes.
All
Yes. All of them definitely help in building what?
All of
Trust.
them.
Yes. Okay. So what is fitrah? This is just, you know, in order to check whether you were following with me or not. What is fitrah? When we say, you know, like every child is born with fitrah, means what? Purity and goodness. Okay. How about, you know, like, for example, do you think, you know, lying response requires what?
Requires connection. No?
Yes. Okay. What about, you know, if you try to scold your kid publicly, is this a good practice?
No, no.
Definitely not. And you need to build trust through what?
Through promises, calm, and Okay.
Listening.
Okay,
Listening.
very good. Through consistency and empathy. Okay. What word would your child use to describe you?
What word would your child use?
A
To
model.
describe you. Uh-huh.
A model.
Mama.
Okay.
My love, mama.
Mama, okay, love.
My
But you know,
love,
like, uh-huh.
my love. They calling you my love,
Okay,
sweetie, mama.
nice.
A role model, Chef. A role model.
Role model, very good. So, but we were talking about that we need to nurture fitrah. We need to lead with mercy. We need to build the trust, you know, between us and our kids. And we just ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us merciful and mindful parents. Ameen. And I just wanted you to, if you have time, to read more about parenting through the work of Imam Ghazali. I mentioned a lot of psychologists, you know, in my presentation, and these are some examples that you could also check. And there are a lot of interesting videos, especially by Yaqeen Institute. If you're familiar with this organization in the United States of America, okay, where they have a lot of series about, you know, parenting. Dr. Rania Awad is very famous, you know, for her lectures about parenting. And of course, you know, Dr. Laura Markham is also another person that maybe you should check. And I'd like to thank you at the end of the presentation for your patience. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to be good parents and grant us pious children in the future. I don't know if we have time, but I will be more than willing. Ms. Ahlam, you need to check the time if there's any time left for questions, if there are any.
Yeah, anyone has any questions?
Okay, so it looks
Thank
like,
you,
you know,
brother.
everything.
Jazakallah khair.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for attending, and inshallah see you again next week.